Welcome to the Agent of Wealth podcast with Mark Bautis from Bautis Financial. In this podcast, Mark helps guide you towards financial freedom, ensure you never run out of money, and create a balance in life that prioritizes what is most important to you. Join us for this journey as Mark draws from years of expertise and guest experts to solve the multiple wealth building challenges involved in your financial life.
Welcome to the Agent of Wealth podcast. On today's show, we have a special guest, Bryant Tolles, the president of KTT Global Advisors, which is a full-service financial consulting firm that assists individuals and businesses with their tax, business advisory, and accountant needs. Bryant also has a specialty as a virtual CFO and cryptocurrency expert, which we'll get into a little bit later. Bryant, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me here.
So I read your bio, and you have experience on a wide range of businesses, large and small. But you got your start out in Silicon Valley?
Yeah, so my quick background is I grew up on the East Coast. I went to grad school in Michigan and then decided I wanted to go out to California and work in the high-tech industry. I had two options when I graduated. One was for IBM, one was for Hewlett-Packard. IBM job was in Rochester, Minnesota. Okay. I interviewed there, and it was 8 below zero. And then I interviewed with HP, and it was 70. So I picked the one.
Easy decision.
Yeah, it was an easy decision.
So did you go from HP to startups?
Well, yeah. So when I got out there in 97, things were heating up in the dot-com space, and I got recruited out of HP by a former boss and worked at a company called Alta Vista, which I describe as Google before Google was Google. So I had my fun there, didn't make any money, and then I kind of caught the startup bug. I liked the idea that you could get involved in a lot of things at a company and learn a lot of things, and they're really quick moving. But like a lot of people in the Silicon Valley, I cycled through a ton of jobs. I probably had 7 or 8 jobs when I was out there. And when I finally left, I had finished up a stint as a public company CFO.
Okay.
It was a great experience.
I know we both actually have math undergrad degrees.
Yeah. So
did you want to work or think about getting the degree and working in finance or in accounting space, or did you just
I knew I was a numbers guy, and I don't know about you back then. I found something that worked for me. I ended up going to a very liberal arts school, which from a math perspective was probably a mistake. They taught you a lot of theory, which I'm a smart guy, but it was a little over my head. So I took a minor in computer science, and the only problem with that is that they taught programming in a language called Pascal, which is considered, I think, a teaching language. So when I graduated in 1990, in a crappy economy, knowing how to program in Pascal, and I tried to get a job, people were like, yeah, something we can't do much with you. So my first job out of college was to be a dishwasher at a restaurant.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then it was up from there.
Nice. And so did you like working out in Silicon Valley on the West Coast? Yeah,
it was for the reasons I described, and then also and people underestimate the value of having nice weather. And when you just can get up in the morning, you don't have to worry about what it's going to be like out. It just boosts your spirits. And I grew up in the Boston area, and back then, the Silicon Valley didn't really exist the way it is now, but Boston was considered the high-tech hub. Mm-hmm. And I've always wondered, well, why did Boston not quite take off like the Silicon Valley did? And it's the weather.
Right.
People are like, where am I going to go? Am I going to freeze my butt off in Boston, or am I going to go to California?
Nice weather.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I did a couple stints at startups, and I think one thing you notice is you better be on your toes because they can pivot quick with what their business model is, and so it definitely was a great learning experience.
Yeah, and as a finance guy, one of the things you have to do when you work in a corporation is pull together a budget, and I hated budgeting, and the reason was because when you're working at a startup, you put all this work into budgeting, and 2 months later it's obsolete.
Right.
Because, like you said, all right, we're going in this direction now. It was fun, and you talk about a broad range of experience. You get to wear so many different hats. Yeah. From what I do, finance, tax, accounting, as a CFO, you get into the other administrative functions, so there's a lot to learn.
And from there, you came back to the East Coast, or did you make a stop after that?
No, I came out here just to get back closer to family. Mm-hmm. I had a good run in corporate. I found that I kind of done everything that I wanted to, working full-time in the corporate space. So I was like, well, I've got a lot of good experience. I actually sat for the CPA exam, which is something that most people do in their 20s when they do it. I kind of did it in reverse. I did my MBA first and then my CPA. So I sat for the CPA exam, passed that, got my license. And then I said, all right, I need to be able to get people to pay me to do something. Okay. Well, they're not going to pay me to sit in the office and sit in meetings, but they will pay me to do things like accounting and taxes. So my focus has been picking up on the tax side and then also supporting companies in, their finance and accounting needs at a sort of a level above a bookkeeper. I can do some bookkeeping and I do some bookkeeping, but really a virtual CFO is good for companies that, they're small, they need a higher level skill set than maybe an accountant can provide, but they don't have the budget or the need for a full-time CFO.
So at what level would a company, is there a certain revenue, a certain growth, a certain number of employees that a company would decide, yes, it probably makes sense that?
I think it really depends on the complexity of the organization more than anything else. I mean, you can have very small companies that, they've got international client base, they've got, they're negotiating complicated contracts, they're having to, deal with investors that need specific reporting, or creditors that need certain reporting and covenants adhered to, and you need some senior leadership. So that could be a small company, and then obviously when you get up into large multi-million-dollar companies, then they need somebody solely focused on that role.
So what would you do as a virtual CFO? What are some of the things that you help a business with?
What I like to say is I do whatever a CFO does. I just am not on site usually. And I'm not necessarily full-time. I might be in there temporarily. I mean, the idea of a virtual CFO, to me, strictly means you're virtual. You're not physically present. But I really think it means any sort of role that is not full-time permanent in the office. And so I've got clients where I've helped them out for 3 months on a more intensive basis, and then others that I'm giving them 5 to 10 hours a month for the last couple of years. So it really depends on need. They know that they've got someone who's been around the block, so to speak, and done a lot of the more senior types of things that a CFO would do.
So would you help the company out with things like putting a budget together, some planning, analysis, reporting, those types of things?
Yeah, all sorts of stuff like that. And, I can dip into legal light, though I'm not an attorney. I've got the knowledge of the accounting side, which is really, it's the foundation for a business from a finance perspective. It's just getting the books right. I know the rules. I've dealt with both international and domestic accounting standards. I've done SEC reporting. I've worked with investors, VC investors, and cap tables and fundraising and all sorts of stuff like that. So it's really need dependent. One thing I do is, you do as well. We go to these meetups and network with people, and I'll talk to, when I go into the city, sometimes I'll talk to entrepreneurs, and you go up there and like, all right, hey, what are you working on, and what do you need? What are your needs? That's usually a good way to figure out what they actually might need help with. One thing they always say is, I need money. Can you raise money for me? I'm like, no, that's your job. I can help. I can provide the backup. I can help you present, but you need to have the contacts and be able to pitch the product.
You'd be surprised actually how many times I get that question.
Yeah.
As well. Like people looking for help.
Yeah.
With finding investors.
Yeah.
But would you help actually, like if someone wanted to create a pitch book or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've done that too. I've pitched Wall Street and Sand Hill Road in my capacity. And so it's definitely something I can do. But, it's a compliment to a CEO. If the CEO can't pitch their own company, then, it's a problem. Yeah.
So what do you do because I imagine you come across a lot where the CEO or the president doesn't even know what they need help with. How do you start an engagement with someone? Do you kind of just ask them questions, be consultative, try and figure out where they are, where they need help, and kind of present that these are the areas that I think
working, I've worked at small companies, I've worked at large companies, and you get a sense over time as to, what the various needs are at certain stages of growth. In my case, sometimes people come to me with specific projects. I need this done. I need evaluation done. I need a business plan. And I did a business plan for a client. And it was really, all right, here's this idea I have. I've got an investor. Good. But I don't really know what the business looks like from a financial perspective. So you talk about, helping them think through these things. And I basically had to model out revenue streams, document all the various costs and expenses, and build a financial model for the business. I mean, that's one thing you can do. Another thing is that they just need someone to sort of oversee, keep things organized. I've got companies that I support that they want to do their accounting, but they want somebody at the end of the quarter that can go in there and look at their financials, make sure that they've got everything accounted for, answer any tax questions, any HR light, again. I can answer questions about that, but just have somebody that's got that vast knowledge base.
And so is that more on like the advisory side of things? Will you get questions where someone will say, I think I'm about hiring this person, which is going to cost this much. Can we afford it, or can it be put into the budget? Will you get into that?
Yeah. I mean, definitely. I provide the structure for them to be able to make those decisions. I'm not going to tell them what they can and can't do, but I'm going to say, based on what we've talked about, based on the forecast we put in place, if you do that, then
here's what the impact is.
Yeah, here's the impact. You're going to push out profitability. You're going to trip your covenants. You're going to do something. And that's really what one of the main roles of a senior finance person is just to have financial, money-based visibility on the business.
Mm-hmm. And I know you mentioned a lot of companies are looking to raise money. Mm-hmm. Do you also help on the debt side?
I have raised debt. It's a similar process. You're creating a pitch deck. You're usually going out to a different set of funders. Yeah, and that's one of the decisions. The whole cap structure decision is one that latter stage founders will struggle with. It's like, all right, what do? I worked at a company once where they basically tapped out their ability to raise equity. Their existing funders didn't want to put any more money into the company, not that it was a bad company. So we said, all right, let's go out and see if we can raise some debt to carry the business over to profitability or a liquidity event or something. So that's what we did. That sort of decision is like, what's the proper balance of debt and equity is something that a CFO can help you with.
And usually get engaged in all different types. Some might be fixed projects, some might be for a couple hours a month, and then some just more involved, more intense.
Yeah, and that's one of the nice things about it is that you have the variety, and rather than focusing on one company and one set of issues, and then having it kind of repeat over and over, is like what you're doing with it on a daily basis is constantly changing. So yeah, I've got ongoing clients at one-time projects.
So I know on your website you have something called the 1 Minute CFO.
Right.
Which you talk sometimes longer than a minute.
Well, yeah, I don't think I've ever kept it to a minute.
But on various financial topics. And I went through them, and I think a lot of them are questions that I get from people I work with, that maybe small business owners, business owners. Can we go over a couple of those?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will preface this by saying that these are things that I've actually, a lot of them come up with like, how does that really work? Right. What is the real answer? Like, I don't know all this stuff off the top of my head.
Right.
So I'm like, I'm going to do some research. I'm going to put it on a slide deck, and I'm going to talk about it. And that's a way of educating myself and also helping other people out to understand things.
So this one, and we'll preface it by saying no one's given any legal and tax advice here.
No.
But the most common one I saw on that list is by far someone starting a new business. What entity structure should they create? Mm-hmm. And then what tax structure should they create? And the most common ones I come across are people deciding LLC, S Corp, or being taxed as an S Corp, being taxed as a partnership.
Right.
How does someone make that decision in terms of deciding what entity structure that they should?
Well, I'll sound like a lawyer and I'll say it depends. Really, the most basic legal structure, so to speak, is a sole proprietorship. I start a business. I set no legal entity up. I just start doing business. You can do that. There are benefits to having a legal structure in place, especially as the company grows and you bring on a payroll and everything, then you kind of have to. Most people start out as an LLC. I think that the S Corp thing, not to sound too cynical, but I think sometimes it gets pitched by lawyers as something, here's what you really need to do, because they can charge an extra fee for setting up the S Corp. The benefits to the S Corp are, and just to expand upon it, it's the S Corp, people confuse an S Corp as being a legal status. It's just tax election. You can have an LLC that's an S corp. You can have a corporation that's an S corp. So really, you're going to set up an LLC as a legal entity or a corporation. You're going to have in some states you can actually have a partnership as an entity. Let's say you set up an LLC. Really, the decision around the S corp versus partnership versus pass-through entity, it revolves around payroll taxes. Mm-hmm. That's the big thing, in that there are some benefits as an S corp, some payroll tax benefits that members of an LLC can obtain by creating an S corp. But then you have to look at the flip side of it. You got to run a payroll, right? You've got to file an 1120-S. You have to file a return. You have to maintain. You have to do additional filing. So time, money, you have to weigh that against the decision. The simplest form, even if you have an LLC as a single person, you're just going to run that through your Schedule C on your 1040. Right. It's very simple.
And how easy is it or hard is it if someone sets up a tax status one way and then wants to change it?
You can. There's a couple of forms that says you're starting from an LLC. You can. There's a couple of forms you'd file with the IRS to either select an S corp, or if you could be taxed as a C corporation as an LLC if you wanted. There may be some benefits to that too, depending on the business. But and there are also some lead time rules. You're really supposed to do it. I think it's 2.5 months into the fiscal year where you want to have that election be made. But you can do it. You can make those changes. Sometimes there are some adjustments to the accounting, to the tax books that you have to make if you go from one to the other. But that's all something that CPA can investigate for you. It's hard to generalize. It's really situation specific.
Sure. The other question I get a lot is, what state should I create my entity in? You hear Delaware, you hear Nevada, great states for doing it. We live in New Jersey, which doesn't have as good a reputation as being a business-friendly state. Does it make a difference what state you're creating your entity in?
From my perspective, I would say it's a good question, because if you're a small business owner just starting out and you don't think, you're like, all right, I'm going to create this business. It's going to provide me a nice source of income. I'm not trying to take over the world. You just set up an entity in your state. Right. You don't need to do a Delaware LLC, for instance, and you're going to have to deal with paying franchise taxes down there. Plus, you're a New Jersey business. You're going to have to file a state. You're still filing a New Jersey return. And I'll address Nevada, and actually from a crypto perspective, Wyoming's trying to make a big name. There are, regulatory ease, and for some of these states, the filing fees are lower. It's really, the states, the non-Delaware, non-local states, they're just trying to create a sort of a source of revenue. Specifically on Delaware, the reason that a lot of companies, at least in the space that I come from, the startup space, will choose Delaware is, well, first of all, it's really kind of a brand name thing. I worked with a startup several years ago that started out as a California corporation. When they started attracting VC investments, they said, you know what, something, we need you to be a Delaware corporation. It's and the reason that Delaware has such a good reputation is that the court system there is very efficient. It tends to be business friendly in the chancery court system, and so when disputes arise, they can be processed quickly and efficiently. And there's such a large case law, whatever the term is. There's such a large amount of case law that is predictable. You know how things are going to happen. But that said, the issues that most small businesses are going to deal with, they run into legal problems. They're not going to get sued in Delaware. Right? Might be an employee issue, and that's going to all be litigated at the local level. Right. Large companies, when you're dealing with like M&A and big multinationals, those kind of issues are going to end up in Delaware courts. Then you want to have that predictability. And again, and like I said, it's a marketing thing too. Public companies, people are like, oh yeah, okay, that's a Delaware corporation. I know what that means. It's like a branding thing.
Right. Yeah. So we talked about earlier your expertise in crypto. How did you get that? Was it just something you were interested in investing in? All of a sudden, your CPA financial side kind of married the two, or was there another way you got into it?
I was interested in more from a little bit from a technological aspect, math guy, computer guy. I'm like, yeah, this is kind of interesting. Let's see how this works. It is not from an investing standpoint.
Okay.
I am not an investor. I rely on people like you to handle that. So when I came out here, I moved back to the East Coast in 2015, and I started out consulting. The crypto craze took off in 2017, and I was like, this feels a lot like another tech boom, like I experienced out in the Silicon Valley. I started going to meetups in the city and talking to people. It was really exciting. One need that I saw was that people from a finance perspective, an accounting perspective, and especially from a tax perspective, didn't understand how this stuff was treated. So I started marketing myself as a crypto tax expert. And that led to some business. I wrote some articles. I sat on panels. I joked that about that time, the cannabis business was taking off. States are starting to legalize. And I decided to build a business around crypto instead of cannabis. And I probably should have picked cannabis because that's from a business perspective has a little more sustainability. But I just found that the issues that you run into in the crypto space from accounting and finance were really interesting. So I decided to have a portion of my business based on that.
What do you see in terms of the next steps with adoption of crypto? Do you see it taking off, or do you see it kind of...
Well, when everybody was hearing about Bitcoin a couple of years ago, it was 100% a bubble. It's just like we saw with the dot-coms, and people talk about the tulip craze in the Netherlands and all that. But it is, from a technological perspective, it's very interesting, and it has some applications. It's for people who don't understand what's underneath it, it's basically a distributed database. So you have a database, a group of records, data records, and they're replicated all over the world, or any servers that holding that. And what that means is that if you make a change to the database, it gets replicated everywhere, and there's not one specific weakness or point of attack. And it allows for transactions between two parties to be done without an intermediary. So that can be handy. It can be handy for money transfers, and that's one of the applications people are looking into. But to answer your question briefly, from a technological stage, it's very early on. Mm-hmm. And I think that what you'll see is over the next 5 to 10 years, as the technology evolves, it's got scalability issues, that they'll find more and more ways that are going to be able to use cryptocurrency and the underlying blockchain technology. It's like when the dot-coms were coming out, they were going to take over the world. There's going to be no more retail stores. And,
right.
It hasn't quite done that, but it's filled a role.
Going to kill the banks, right?
Right.
From a tax perspective of it, though, and even from the investment tax perspective, is it treated just like any other capital asset, like a stock? Or
pretty much, okay. Yeah. I don't want to broadcast this too much, except for I'm on a podcast, but it really is not, the taxes for it are really not as complicated as people want to make it. Mm-hmm. It's treated as property by the IRS, and I'm speaking solely domestically. There's all sorts of variations when you look at tax treatment around the world, but from the IRS, it's treated as an asset, and you're going to report gains and losses on your Schedule D, and there are some weird situations that come up in cryptocurrency. If you hold a certain cryptocurrency token and it forks, for instance, you might all of a sudden end up with some of another cryptocurrency token. That doesn't happen really with stocks. Right. You get a stock split. But from the cryptocurrency perspective, how do you handle a situation like that? How do you handle a situation where you buy a token and then the founders take the money and run off to Bermuda and leave or some place that's even harder to extradite people from? Take all your money. What do you do? When do you write it off? When is it a loss? Right. So there's some funny situations that come up, but generally it's pretty straightforward. The problem that a lot of people run into is that, unlike equity trading, you may have a stock trading account You get a form from the IRS or from the company at the end of the year that says, here's your gains and losses, here's how you report them. There is very little mandatory reporting from these crypto exchanges, and they're all over the place. They're all over the world. They report data in different formats. So what I've done a lot of projects where somebody's like, I need to report my gains and losses. Can you help me? 90% of it is getting all the data together and running it through a tax program, a crypto-specific tax program that calculates gains and losses, and figuring out where there might need to be some adjustments. Oh, by the way, did you actually give your Cindy 3 Ether in 2018 because you're missing 3? What happened?
Got to be a detective.
Yeah, so it's and that doesn't really happen in the more formalized markets.
Are you seeing, though, a lot more people investing in it than...
No, I mean, it was crazy in 2017. People were speculating. They were going in, going out, doing a lot of trading. Now it's an asset to invest in. It is a store of value, if nothing else. Bitcoin isn't going away. Bitcoin is a store of value. The price fluctuates between 7 and 10 grand. It's still volatile, but it's something to complement your investments, not be the entire investment.
Mm-hmm. And as far as a currency, do you see someone being able to walk into Dunkin' Donuts and buy a coffee with Bitcoin?
Specifically from a technology perspective, Bitcoin isn't very good for that. It's slow. Eventually, I see the potential if they can, if the technology evolves, the distributed ledger, blockchain technology evolves, there may be a role for that. But that was one of the things they'd always say. It's like, you can use Bitcoin to buy coffee. Well, nobody was doing that.
Right.
It just doesn't really work that well.
Yeah. And I guess even, you mentioned outside Bitcoin, but that whole blockchain technology and the use, not just from buying things, but storing records, a lot of
legal use cases. They're talking about data, medical records. Voting is one thing. I mean, Iowa disaster aside, there'll be a lot more uses to it that people will find as the technology evolves.
Sure. Well, we're just about out of time. How best can someone reach out to you, Bryant?
I would just go out to my website, kttglobal.com, send me an email. I usually answer really quickly because I have a very short attention span. So when an email comes in, I'm like, okay, what's that say? And, we go from there.
Okay, great. So I'd like to thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
And I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in today, and we'll catch you on the next episode of The Agent of Wealth.
Thank you for listening to the Agent of Wealth podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered represents the views and opinions of the guests and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Bautis Financial. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional financial planning and investment advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investments and financial planning.